At my husband's memorial, my son leaned in and whispered, "Don't cry, it's embarrassing." At the will reading, I made sure the embarrassment had his name on it. He got the clock, my granddaughter got the house, and his girlfriend, she got a one-line thank you and nothing else. Before we begin, may I ask, where in this big, beautiful world are you listening from? It's always a quiet honor to know who's sharing this space. Drop it in the comments and don't forget to subscribe. The chapel smelled like lilies and lemon oil, a mix that clung to the polished pews, and the Sunday suits pulled out only for weddings or funerals. Morning light filtered through stained glass in quiet colors, faded reds, patient blues, casting soft halos on bowed heads. Mildred sat near the front, tissue crumpled in her hand. Her posture as rigid as the pew's edge. She didn't cry, not exactly. Her eyes brimmed, sure, but the tears didn't fall. They clung there like they were waiting for permission. Beside her, Derek shifted. He leaned in close, not enough to draw attention, but close enough that she could smell the cologne he'd doused himself in. Expensive, sharp, the kind he wore only to impress people who didn't matter. His lips barely moved. "Don't cry, it's embarrassing." She didn't look at him. She didn't need to. The words fell into her like ice water down her spine, quick, clinical, and practiced. Her nails dug slightly into her palm. Tissue tore. A few feet behind them, Vanessa sat in the next pew over, legs crossed at the ankle, hands folded neatly in her lap. Her posture was perfect. Her smile was tighter than her bun. When she caught Mildred's glance, she offered that smile, cool, practiced, complicit. Not warm, not kind, not really a smile at all. The pastor's voice carried on above them, reverent but mechanical. He barely knew the man in the casket. A good friend to many, a loving presence. His work will be remembered. He didn't know about the way that man used to call Mildred every Sunday just to ask about her day. He didn't know the voice she wouldn't hear again. Mildred kept her eyes straight ahead, jaw clenched so hard it ached. She didn't blink. When the final hymn ended, the air changed. People stood in practiced rhythm, first row, second, third, and moved down the aisle like a slow river of grief and obligation. Some offered polite nods. Some hugged her briefly, whispering the same phrases in different voices. He was such a light. "I'm so sorry, honey. He talked about you all the time. He loved you." Mildred nodded through it, absorbed it like static. Derek didn't offer comfort. He stood a few steps back, thumbing through his phone. One eyebrow lifted as he scrolled. A ghost of a grin tugged at his lips. Probably a text from one of his co-workers, or maybe Vanessa. She'd leaned in close to him once during the service, whispered something Mildred didn't catch. He didn't flinch. Elaine came forward then, soft-voiced and warm, with the smell of mint gum and rose perfume. Her hug lingered a second longer than most. "He used to be sweet, remember?" she said softly into Mildred's ear. Mildred's hand tensed against her back before pulling away. She smiled, but her eyes didn't. "He stopped pretending," she said, quiet but steady. Elaine blinked, then nodded. The murmurs faded as people trickled out into the church courtyard. The sun had risen higher now, sharp and golden. The breeze lifted the hem of Mildred's skirt. She turned slightly, watching Derek laugh at something on his screen. Vanessa leaned on the railing, sunglasses already on, arms crossed like she was waiting for brunch. Mildred stood still. Inside, the casket remained at the altar, closed, heavy, final. She glanced back once, not for him, for herself, to mark the moment, to seal it away. The man in that box had been the last person who remembered her childhood, the one who knew what her laugh sounded like before it got filtered through years of someone else's needs. He hadn't been perfect, but he'd been honest. She'd loved him for that. Derek's voice floated across the courtyard, too loud. "You ready? Or what?" Mildred turned her head slowly, like someone waking from a long sleep. "I need 5 minutes," she said evenly. Derek rolled his eyes but didn't argue. He went back to his phone. Elaine reached for her hand gently. "You want me to stay?" Mildred shook her head. "No, I'm okay." But something inside her shifted, small, seismic, like a whisper that shook her still. She looked at the church door one last time. Then she walked toward the car, her pace calm, her spine straight, her expression unreadable. She didn't cry, not here, not yet. The lawyer's office smelled faintly of old carpet and lemon cleaner. It was quiet, save for the tick of a wall clock that seemed a little too loud for such a small room. The blinds were drawn halfway, the afternoon light slanting in muted golds across the oak desk. Mildred sat alone at first. One leg crossed tightly over the other, a manila envelope resting in her lap. She didn't open it right away. She just stared at it like it might pulse in her hand, like it might fight back. The last time she and John had come here, 6 months before the stroke, they'd laughed in the parking lot afterward, poking fun at the seriousness of it all. If we get hit by a bus, at least they'll know who gets the record player. He'd winked at her. She'd rolled her eyes, but kissed his cheek anyway. Now she was here alone. No wink, no laugh. Just paper. Nathan Kaplan, their attorney, knocked lightly before entering. He was a kind-eyed man with a voice like gravel softened by whiskey. He gave her a small nod and settled into the chair behind the desk. "You sure you want to go through it now?" he asked gently. "I'm sure," Mildred said. Her voice was steady, but her fingers betrayed her, tapping once, then again, against the envelope. Nathan nodded and opened his own copy. He cleared his throat before beginning. The last will and testament of John Ronald Whitaker. It went on in the legal rhythm Mildred half expected. Full names, precise phrasing, contingencies, and codicils. Then came the part she was waiting for. To Derek Allen Whitaker, my son, I leave the antique tool collection stored in the basement workroom, and the Howard Miller grandfather clock in the foyer. Nathan paused to glance at her, as if to double-check. Mildred said nothing. The words moved forward. To Mildred Grace Whitaker, my wife, I leave any personal items not otherwise allocated, and I confirm all financial and property decisions in the attached joint trust agreement. She exhaled, slow, controlled. Her heart didn't race. She'd read this version before, helped write it. Nathan continued. The house at 1196 Ashbury Lane, all joint savings, and my life insurance policy shall be split evenly between the Whitaker Family Trust, benefiting the Ashbury Reading Foundation, and Jenna Louise Whitaker, granddaughter, age 12. Her name, Jenna's name. No Derek, no Vanessa. It felt like a stone settling into place. Nathan reached the final line. No further claims or contestations shall be recognized. He looked up. I can prepare the standard notification letters if you'd like. Mildred set the envelope on the desk with a quiet tap. No, I'll handle it. A pause. And I want a reading, at the house, with everyone present. Nathan blinked. You mean read the will out loud? Yes, she said, word for word. He leaned back slowly, folding his hands. That's uncommon. It'll be clarifying, she said. Necessary. Nathan hesitated. You want Derek there? He'll come. He'll think he's getting something else. Nathan gave a long, quiet nod. I'll bring copies. As she stood to leave, the envelope still untouched, Nathan walked her to the door. Wasn't easy for him, I imagine, he said carefully, to do this before he passed. He wasn't afraid of hard things, Mildred replied. He just hated wasted kindness. When she stepped into the hallway, Elaine was waiting on the bench outside, flipping through an old magazine. She looked up as Mildred approached. Well, Elaine asked. Mildred handed her the envelope, exactly as we left it. Elaine opened it, scanning quickly. Derek gets tools and a clock, she said, raising her brows. That man once said John didn't even deserve the garage. Mildred gave a faint smile, humorless. That's why he doesn't get the garage. Elaine flipped to the last page. Her eyes stopped on the line about the foundation. Jenna's gonna be all right. She will, Mildred said softly. And Vanessa gets nothing. Elaine whistled. That'll be a funeral of its own. Mildred nodded. They stepped into the sunlight together, the air heavier than it had been this morning. The wind had picked up slightly, rustling the trees in the lot. Mildred stopped beside her car, fingers resting on the door handle. Can you be there? For the reading? Elaine gave her a look that didn't need words. Of course. As Mildred slid into the driver's seat, she paused with the key in the ignition. This wasn't revenge, not yet. This was clarity. The kind that cut clean before it dug deep. The sun had begun to soften by the time Derek showed up. He didn't bother knocking, just let himself in through the back, keys jangling, attitude dragging behind him like a lazy shadow. Mildred stood at the kitchen sink, drying a coffee mug. She didn't turn. "Hey," Derek called casually, dropping his sunglasses on the table. "Got your text. Something about Dad's will?" She set the mug down gently on the dish rack. "There's going to be a formal reading. You'll get the details tomorrow." Derek blinked at her back. "We're not doing it now?" She turned then, wiping her hands on a towel. "No, we'll speak at the reading." He gave a short huff, amused. "What is this? A courtroom drama?" She didn't answer. He squinted, studying her. "You all right?" "I'm fine," she said. Her voice was even, dry as chalk dust. Derek shrugged, already bored. "Okay, well, just let me know when. I'm sure it's just a formality anyway." He reached into the fridge without asking, popped open one of the bottled teas she kept for guests, and wandered back out the way he came, leaving the door open behind him. Mildred walked over and shut it. Upstairs, Vanessa sat at the edge of the guest bed, laptop balanced on her knees. She clicked through 3 real estate listings, eyes darting from square footage to school district scores, before pulling up the tax records for 1196 Ashbury Lane. 4 bedrooms, brick, prime zip code, no mortgage since 2010. She opened another tab. How to contest a will. Adult children. Her reflection stared back faintly in the screen. Vanessa smoothed her hair, then opened Zillow. The doorbell rang at 4:12 p.m. Mildred opened it before the second chime. Jenna stood there in her school uniform, backpack slung over one shoulder, a pink spiral notebook clutched in her arm like a shield. "Hi, Grandma," she said. Mildred smiled, softly, only for her. "Come in, baby." They settled on the couch together. Jenna kicked off her sneakers and tucked her legs under her like she always did when she used to come over every Wednesday after piano lessons. She looked older now, but not jaded. There was still kindness in her face, still space for softness. After a moment, she leaned into Mildred's side. Not rushed, not performative. She just rested there. Mildred ran her hand gently down Jenna's hair, smoothing it once. "Long day?" Jenna nodded against her shoulder. "Group project. I did all the work." "You get that from me." Jenna gave a tired chuckle. "I know." They sat like that for several quiet minutes. No news on, no phones out. Just the distant hum of the refrigerator and the muffled ticking of the foyer clock. When Jenna finally pulled back, Mildred turned to face her fully. "You've always seen me," she said softly. "Even when the others didn't." Jenna frowned slightly, unsure, but nodded. "I mean it," Mildred continued. "When you were little, you used to tilt your head when I was quiet, like you knew I was tired but didn't want to say it. You never asked me to play pretend. You just sat beside me and held my hand. You were 3. Jenna blinked fast, and her grip on the spiral notebook tightened. "I see you too," Mildred said. "And I want you to have something." She rose and crossed the room to the sideboard, opening a bottom drawer. From the very back, beneath old linens, she pulled out a small, worn wooden box. It had no lock, just a faded label taped to the top in careful cursive. "For later, when you're ready." Mildred placed it gently in Jenna's lap. "What is it?" Jenna asked. "You'll know when it's time." Jenna stared at the box, like it might whisper to her. Mildred stood slowly, brushing invisible dust from her palms. "Don't show it to your father, or Vanessa." Jenna nodded, still holding the box carefully, like it might break under the weight of the moment. From the hallway, the grandfather clock chimed 4:30. Vanessa's voice echoed faintly from upstairs, something about home equity and resale value. Mildred closed her eyes for just a second, then reopened them. "Would you like to stay for dinner?" Jenna looked up at her. "Can I help cook?" "You always could." They moved into the kitchen together. Mildred handed her an apron, and Jenna slipped it on like she'd done it 100 times before. Outside, storm clouds began to crawl in from the west, quiet and gray. The air shifted. The silence between them wasn't empty. It was gathering. The living room felt colder than usual, though the thermostat read 72. Mildred had opened the curtains that morning, letting gray daylight fall across the long walnut table. The air smelled faintly of polished wood and distant rain. The grandfather clock ticked from the foyer, its steady rhythm like a countdown. Nathan Kaplan stood near the table, papers arranged neatly before him. His glasses rested halfway down his nose, and his tone was patient, measured, the way one speaks to a fragile room. Derek slouched in one of the dining chairs, scrolling through his phone until Nathan cleared his throat. Vanessa sat perfectly upright beside him, lipstick flawless, hand resting lightly on his arm as if she owned the house already. Jenna sat near the end, her legs crossed, that small wooden box tucked quietly in her bag. Mildred took the chair opposite Nathan. Her expression was unreadable. "Thank you all for coming," Nathan began. "This is the formal reading of the last will and testament of John Ronald Whitaker." Derek waved a hand. "Let's get to it." Nathan's gaze flickered to Mildred before continuing. "The testator, John Whitaker, being of sound mind and body, hereby declares this document to be his final will." The words rolled through the room like distant thunder, impersonal, steady, inevitable. Derek leaned back, trying to look relaxed. Vanessa nodded occasionally, pretending to understand the legal phrasing. Jenna listened intently, her small hands folded in her lap. Clause 1, Clause 2, routine. A few small donations to the church, a bequest to the community library. Then Clause 3. To Derek Allen Whitaker, my son, I leave my collection of antique woodworking tools and the Howard Miller grandfather clock currently displayed in the foyer. Derek smirked. "Figures," he muttered, half under his breath. He loved that clock. Nathan didn't respond. He turned the page deliberately. Clause 4. To Mildred Grace Whitaker, my wife, I leave all personal effects and confirm her authority over our joint assets and property decisions as previously agreed. Mildred's gaze didn't waver. Her hands rested still on the table. By Clause 5, the air shifted. To Vanessa Lynn Marshall, I leave my appreciation for her companionship toward my son and wish her continued success in her personal and professional endeavors. That was it. No item, no inheritance, just a polite dismissal wrapped in legal courtesy. Vanessa blinked once, twice, then sat straighter, as though posture could undo omission. "Is that," she began. Nathan paused mid-sentence, eyes flicking toward Mildred. She gave a single nod. He continued. Clause 6. The remaining properties, accounts, and holdings of the Whitaker estate are to be allocated as follows. Derek leaned forward again, a smirk tugging back into place. He expected a reversal, something, anything that would make sense of this. Nathan's voice stayed calm. 50% to the Ashbury Arts Endowment, newly established in the name of John and Mildred Whitaker, to provide scholarships and community programs in visual and literary arts. The smirk vanished. Derek frowned. "What? You're giving half to charity?" Nathan didn't answer him directly. He turned the next page. "And the remaining 50%, he said, carefully, is to be placed in trust for Jenna Louise Whitaker, to be released upon her 30th birthday." Silence. Vanessa's lips parted slightly, but no sound came out. Derek's jaw clenched, his face reddening just above the collar. The rain outside began tapping faintly against the windows, a soft percussion that filled the void where words refused to form. "That's not," Derek started, leaning forward. "That can't be it." Nathan closed the folder with deliberate precision. "That concludes the reading." Derek laughed once, sharp, humorless. "So I get a damn clock and some tools. You think Dad meant that?" Mildred's eyes found his, steady, calm. He meant every word. Vanessa stood abruptly, chair scraping against hardwood. "This is absurd. We've been helping you for years." "Helping yourselves," Mildred corrected. "There's a difference." Jenna flinched slightly at the edge in her grandmother's tone, but Mildred didn't look away. Derek slammed his palm on the table. "You let him do this?" Mildred folded her hands. "I didn't let him. We decided together, while he still had the strength to be honest." Vanessa's eyes darted toward Nathan. "We'll contest it." "You can try," Nathan said softly, "but you won't succeed." The thunder rolled closer now, the kind that shakes picture frames and old foundations. A long silence followed, thick, electric. Derek rose, breath heavy. "You're not going to get away with this." Mildred stood, her chair pushing back with a slow creak. You already did. For years. For a moment, no one moved. Then lightning flashed through the window, slicing across the table, catching Vanessa's pale reflection and Derek's clenched fists. Jenna looked at her grandmother. Mildred met her gaze and gave the smallest nod. Almost imperceptible, the storm broke outside. Inside, it was just beginning. Derek stood with both hands flat on the table, breathing like he'd just run a mile uphill. His eyes, bloodshot and wild, scanned every face in the room like he was trying to catch someone flinching. "You're cutting out your only son," he finally said, voice rising an octave. "That's what this is?" Mildred didn't move. "I'm honoring the only kindness left in this family." Derek's mouth opened again, but nothing came out. Vanessa made a sharp noise of disbelief, half scoff, half growl, and pushed her chair back hard enough to rattle the floor. Her heels clicked like gunshots as she strode toward the hallway. "Unbelievable," she muttered under her breath. "Unfreaking believable." She didn't look at anyone, just grabbed her coat off the banister, shoved her laptop into its case, and slammed the door behind her. Nathan didn't flinch. He calmly gathered the papers into his briefcase with the detached precision of someone who'd seen worse. "The will is fully executed," he said, without looking up. "Irrevocable, properly witnessed, and submitted for probate last week." Derek turned toward him, eyes narrowing. "So that's it?" "That's it," Nathan said. "There's no loophole. John was of sound mind and well within his rights." Derek let out a bitter laugh and raked both hands through his hair, pacing now. "He was manipulated. You don't see that." Mildred's voice was quiet but unflinching. "He was tired of watching you use up every second chance like it was your birthright." Derek stopped mid-step, shoulders tight. "You think I didn't earn anything? That I'm nothing?" "You took everything you wanted," she said, still seated. "And when there was nothing left to take, you stayed out of convenience, not love." His face twisted, hurt, yes, but something uglier underneath. A lifetime of entitlement unraveling thread by thread. Footsteps approached from the foyer. Elaine had arrived late, as usual, but leaned casually against the doorframe now, coffee in one hand, umbrella in the other. She glanced around the room like walking into a drama she already knew the ending to. "Well," she said with a smirk, "didn't expect this kind of turnout for Act 2. Derek turned toward her, eyes wide. "You knew?" Elaine raised her brows. "I didn't know specifics, but let's just say I was told to bring popcorn, not Kleenex." Nathan shut his briefcase with a soft click. "I'll send the final copies for your records." "You do that," Derek said, voice low and venomous. Elaine stepped aside as Nathan passed through, rain clinging to his coat. He nodded politely toward Mildred before disappearing out the door. Silence hung in the air again, thick and humming. Jenna still hadn't moved. She sat with her hands folded tightly in her lap, staring at a spot on the table like she could burn a hole through the grain. Derek finally noticed. "You're okay with this?" he snapped, turning on her. "You don't think it's manipulative? Keeping everything locked away till you're 30? That's not a gift. That's control." Jenna looked up at him. For a long second she said nothing, then, very quietly, "It's time-released protection. That's what Grandpa called it." Derek stared at her like she'd spoken a foreign language. He opened his mouth to argue, but she looked away again, and he knew better. He stormed out of the room without another word. The front door opened. Slammed. Rain pounded harder against the windows. Elaine walked over and dropped her umbrella by the door. "Well, if anyone needs a drink, I brought the good bourbon." Mildred stood at last. Her spine ached, but she straightened to full height. "I don't need a drink." Elaine studied her for a moment. "You okay?" "No," Mildred said honestly, "but I'm clean." She walked slowly to the mantel, adjusted the photo of John, taken the summer before his diagnosis, when the sun still lit up the corners of his smile, and exhaled. Jenna remained at the table, staring now at the small box in her lap. Elaine turned to leave. "You want me to stay and help clean up?" Mildred shook her head. "No need. The storm did most of it." Elaine gave a nod and stepped out into the wind. The house was quiet again. Mildred looked at Jenna. "You can ask me anything." Jenna looked up, her expression unreadable. "What did he put in the letter? Mildred paused, then stepped closer. I haven't read it. It's not for me. Jenna slowly opened the box. Inside was a sealed envelope, her name in John's handwriting. Careful, steady. She didn't open it, not yet, but she didn't let go of it either. The storm had rolled through overnight, leaving the world washed clean but raw. Morning light came in thin strips through the blinds, cutting across the living room in quiet gold. The house smelled faintly of rain and cedar polish, old, familiar, and heavy with memory. Mildred sat at the edge of the sofa, still in her robe, a cup of coffee cooling in her hand. Jenna sat cross-legged across from her, wearing the same sweatshirt she'd slept in, the sealed envelope from the box resting beside her like a living thing. Neither had said much since dawn. The silence wasn't awkward. It was expectant. Finally, Mildred spoke. He embarrassed me, she said softly, in front of your grandfather's memory, and I won't let that stand. Jenna's eyes flicked up, uncertain. You mean Dad? Mildred nodded. He's forgotten what dignity looks like. He's forgotten who gave him everything he ever used to tear others down. She set the coffee on the table, leaning forward, elbows on her knees. Your grandfather spent his last year writing down what he couldn't say out loud. He wanted the truth to outlast his patience. She stood and crossed to the old oak cabinet near the hallway, John's cabinet, still smelling faintly of tobacco and lemon wax. She unlocked the bottom drawer and pulled out a leather-bound stack of journals, their edges frayed, each one labeled neatly in John's handwriting. Your grandfather's, she said, placing them gently on the table. But they're not all his words, Jenna blinked. You wrote in them too? Mildred gave a small nod. We shared them. Started after his diagnosis. It was supposed to be a kind of conversation, but when he grew weaker, it became a record. She opened one. Inside, John's slanted writing filled the left-hand pages. Mildred's smaller, steadier script filled the right. Two voices echoing in ink, each page a dialogue frozen in time. She flipped to one near the end, the paper worn from rereading. John's entry was brief. Derek called. Asked if we could loan him more. I told him no. He said we were ungrateful. I didn't recognize his voice anymore. Below it, Mildred had written, We raised him to be capable. Somewhere along the way, he mistook that for ode. Jenna's hand reached out, trembling slightly, as she turned the next page. Vanessa's name appeared, sharp, underlined twice. Mildred. Vanessa told the neighbor I'm senile. I pretended not to hear. John didn't. John, if cruelty is inherited, it's not from your side. I know that much. Jenna swallowed, her throat tight. You kept all of this? I kept it all, Mildred said quietly, because I knew this day would come, when words would weigh more than excuses. She slid one of the journals toward her granddaughter. I want you to read them when you're ready, not for revenge, for understanding. Jenna traced her finger along the cracked spine. They'll hate me, she said, for getting anything. For being in the will, for even being here. Mildred studied her. Then you'll know what I've always known. Jenna looked up, eyes glassy. What's that? That love shouldn't come with conditions, Mildred said. If it does, it's not love, it's leverage. The words hung there, steady and final. Outside, the rain had stopped completely, leaving a soft gleam over the front yard. The neighborhood was still asleep, blinds drawn, puddles reflecting patches of sky. Inside, the house felt quieter than it had in years, not empty, but waiting. Jenna picked up the envelope. He wrote to me, she whispered. I can feel it. Mildred nodded. He did. And whatever's in there, it's yours. Don't rush it. Jenna turned the envelope over in her hands, running her thumb over the faint indentation of her name. She hesitated, then looked at her grandmother again. Why me? She asked. You could have given everything to the foundation, to something safe. Why, me? Mildred smiled faintly, weary but sure. Because you still believe people can be better. You still give before you measure. She stood and walked toward the window, parting the blinds with 2 fingers. A car rolled slowly past on the slick street, Derek's, silver and impatient, pausing just long enough to cast a glance toward the house before disappearing around the corner. Mildred didn't flinch. She let the blinds fall back into place and turned to Jenna. When you open that letter, she said softly, don't just read his words, read between them. That's where the truth lives. Jenna nodded, gripping the envelope tightly, like it might float away otherwise. A faint rumble of distant thunder returned, low and unfinished. Mildred sat back down beside her, resting a hand lightly on Jenna's knee. Storms don't end, she murmured. They just move on to the next town. Jenna glanced toward the window, then back at her grandmother, and slowly, almost reluctantly, she began to break the seal. Elaine's knock came with no urgency. 2 short raps, and the familiar creak of the door swinging open before Mildred could answer. She was in the den, sorting through donation slips and tax papers, when Elaine's voice called out from the foyer. I figured you'd want to see this before it makes the rounds. Mildred looked up. Elaine stepped into the room holding her phone out, screen glowing with a screenshot. Facebook. Derek's name. The post was public. When your own mother turns on blood for vanity and charity, you don't fight her, you expose her. More to come. Stay tuned. No names, but enough breadcrumbs for anyone local to know. Enough to start questions. Elaine lowered the phone. There are already 6 comments. One of them from that guy who runs the car wash. Said you always looked cold. That's how fast these things turn. Mildred took a slow breath. Not shaken, not surprised. Vanity and charity, she said. He really doesn't know the difference. Elaine dropped onto the armchair beside her. You want me to call him? I still know what gets under his skin. No. Mildred reached for her reading glasses. We don't respond to noise. We respond with permanence. She opened her laptop and began typing. Within minutes, a new message sat addressed to Nathan Kaplan. Subject line, Urgent Estate Update. Nathan, let's move forward with the public notice of the no contest clause, including the original witness list and asset protections. No delay. I'd also like to review the irrevocable trust language and ensure it's watertight. No reversals, no mediation clauses, no gray area. M. She hit send, then closed the laptop with a definitive click. Elaine raised an eyebrow. Well, damn, that was surgical. He wants a stage, Mildred said. He'll get a courtroom if he keeps going. Later that afternoon, Jenna sat at the kitchen table, a half-eaten apple in front of her, textbooks open but forgotten. Her phone buzzed once. She ignored it. It buzzed again. This time, she glanced at the screen. A text from Derek. You know you can fix this, right? She stared at it, reread it, and then again. A third buzz. We're still family. You're the only one they'll listen to. Her fingers hovered over the screen, then typed slowly. I didn't break it. She hit send and pushed the phone away like it burned. Her hands trembled, but only slightly. She didn't cry. She didn't shake. She turned back to her history homework. By dusk, Mildred stood in the music room, looking at the upright Steinway John had refinished for her on their 25th anniversary. The keys were slightly yellowed now, a few stuck when pressed too gently, but the sound still held warmth, like low sunlight on a wooden floor. She ran her fingers across the top. Dustless. Loved. She picked up her phone and dialed the local elementary school. Yes, this is Mildred Whitaker. I'd like to make a donation of a piano. A pause. Then the warmth in the secretary's voice bloomed. Oh my goodness, Mrs. Whitaker. The students would be thrilled. We've been trying to fundraise for a used one next year. No need, Mildred said softly. I'll cover the move and tuning. I'd like it placed in the music room before the end of the week. She hung up. For the first time in days, her shoulders dropped half an inch. She looked around the music room. John's old record player. The quilt she'd sewn during chemo. The photograph of Jenna's recital, where her hands hovered nervously over the keys, 12 years old and glowing under stage lights. Legacy didn't have to be loud. It just had to outlast the noise. At bedtime, Mildred stepped into the hallway and passed by Jenna's door. It was slightly ajar. Jenna sat on the floor, reading from the first journal, not crying, not smiling, just absorbing. Her fingertips ran slowly over the ink like she could feel the weight of the words through the paper. Mildred didn't interrupt. She let the moment be. Back in her own room, she clicked on the bedside lamp, slid her planner toward her, and wrote in neat cursive, Monday, confirm deed transfer to trust. Tuesday, meet with Nathan. Wednesday, piano delivery. Thursday, obituary follow-up submission. The pen hovered for a second. Then she wrote, Friday, begin again. She closed the planner and turned off the light. Down the hall, Jenna's bedroom light was still on. And downstairs, her phone buzzed again. Derek, this time, you've made a mistake you can't walk back. Jenna stared at the screen. Then, without hesitation, she powered it off. The clinic was bright in a way that felt sterile rather than cheerful. Mint walls, silver furniture, and fluorescent lighting that flattened everything into grayscale. Mildred sat in a straight-backed chair across from a woman in smart slacks and an even smarter tone. The neuropsychologist's name was Dr. Marla Keener. No small talk, no condescension. Just a clipboard, a stopwatch, and the kind of voice that didn't assume age meant decline. I'm going to ask you a series of questions, she said. Some of them may seem simple, some less so. Mildred nodded. I understand. Can you tell me today's date? Thursday, the 17th of March. And where are we? Dr. Keener's office, Ashbury Diagnostic Center, 2nd floor. You just unlocked the front door for me yourself. Dr. Keener smiled faintly. Correct. The questions kept coming. Math, memory, logic, abstract reasoning. Mildred handled them all with calm precision. She didn't rush, didn't second-guess. Names, sequences, historical recall. She even paused mid-test to sip water without asking permission. Not rude, just in control. An hour later, Dr. Keener tapped her pen once against the clipboard and set it down. Well, Mrs. Whitaker, she said, you're sharp as ever. Mildred gave a soft smile. That's good to know, Dr. Keener stood. We'll file the report with the legal certification, as requested. You'll receive the signed summary by tomorrow. Please forward it to my attorney as well. Nathan Kaplan. He'll attach it to the estate file. Dr. Keener paused. Is this related to the will? Mildred rose from her seat. No, it's related to the rumor about my mind. Outside, the air was brisk but clean. The sun had returned. A new breeze cut across the parking lot, and Mildred let it hit her full in the face before slipping on her sunglasses. As she slid into the driver's seat, her phone buzzed. Elaine. Guess who failed the test they made you take? Mildred stared at the screen for a beat, then tapped to read the rest. Elaine. Derek showed up at Nathan's office unannounced. Tried to act like a concerned son. Wanted a competency eval, just in case. Nathan let him talk. Said, She already passed it. It's on file. Would you like to take it too? Elaine. He stormed out. No follow-up. Mildred smiled. Not from joy, but from confirmation. Truth always took its time, but it never missed its mark. That afternoon, Jenna arrived with a paper bag from the bakery down the road and a look that tried to be neutral, but didn't quite make it. They're talking, she said as soon as she stepped inside. Mildred closed the door gently behind her. They always are. Dad says you're being cruel, that this is some kind of power play. Did he mention the Facebook post? No, of course not. They moved into the kitchen. Jenna placed the bag on the counter. Lemon scones. Mildred took one. Your grandfather's favorite. Jenna's hands were tight around the strap of her shoulder bag. They're saying you're spiteful, that you're doing all this to punish them. Mildred took a slow bite, then looked up. Her tone didn't rise. Her eyes didn't narrow. Truth, she said simply, sounds like bitterness to the guilty. Jenna blinked, once. I don't feel guilty, she whispered. Mildred reached across and placed a hand over hers. That's how you know you're not them. The room was quiet for a long moment. The only sound was the fridge's low hum and the distant scrape of tree branches outside. Then Mildred pulled a slim envelope from a drawer. Your father filed something yesterday, an informal grievance with the probate court. He'll try again next week, probably louder. Jenna exhaled. Can he undo it? No, Mildred said, but he can make noise trying. What happens then? Mildred gave her a long, unreadable look. Then we let the record speak. That evening, Mildred sat alone in the music room, now emptier without the piano. Her hands rested in her lap, fingers twitching with a tune only she could hear. She didn't look sad, just stripped down, clean. She pulled her planner from the armrest and flipped to next week. Next to Monday, she wrote, File final amendment to trust. No reversals, no mediation, Absolute. She clicked her pen closed. The final click echoed louder than expected. Just then, the doorbell rang. She stood slowly, spine stiff from the cold. When she opened the door, a man in a sport coat handed her a thick envelope. Process service for Mildred Whitaker. She took it without blinking. Thank you. He nodded and turned away. She shut the door. She didn't open the envelope. Not yet. She walked it to the fireplace, set it on the mantel beside John's photo, and sat down with her tea. Let them come. She'd passed her test. Now it was their turn. Morning light crawled slowly across the living room floor, stretching long and pale over the hardwood. Mildred stood in her robe, hands steady as she slit open the thick envelope Derek had served her 2 days earlier. 10 pages, single-spaced, legalese wrapped around accusation, implication, and desperation. The language was technical: undue influence, contested competency, motive of malice, but the tone underneath was unmistakably Derek. Cold, performed, predictable. She read it all, once, and then again, slower, until each word fell into place like a stone. Then, without ceremony, she walked to the shredder tucked beneath the hallway desk. One hand on the edge of the pages, one breath in, and then, vrum, gone. Elaine appeared in the doorway, sipping coffee, hair still wet from the morning rain. Well, she said, last chance to be manipulated. How touching. Mildred gave a soft snort. I gave him more patience than most people give strangers. Elaine leaned against the wall, watching her. And now? Now I give him silence. He'll hear that louder. On Tuesday afternoon, Mildred sat on the worn piano bench at the Ashbury Community Center, surrounded by 5 folding chairs and a handful of curious faces, most of them children, 2 of them adults who'd never touched a key before. This isn't about playing pretty, she said. This is about listening, to yourself first, then the music. The upright Yamaha had a couple chipped keys and a faint buzz in the low octaves, but the sound was serviceable, familiar. She placed her hands on the keys and began to play. Slow, clear notes, no flash, just feeling. A boy in the front row watched her like she was making magic. When she stopped, he didn't clap. He just whispered, I didn't know it could sound like that. Mildred smiled. That's how you'll know when you're playing it right, when it doesn't sound like someone else. She stayed late, helping a girl with a stutter get through her scales without rushing. By the time she left, the sun had dropped low and golden, washing the sidewalk in long shadows. She hadn't thought about Derek once. Jenna's recital fell on a Thursday. The auditorium was modest. Folding chairs, donated lighting, and a cracked stage floor, but the turnout was strong. Parents filled the seats, younger siblings squirmed in laps, and program pamphlets rustled like wind through leaves. Mildred sat in the 3rd row, hands folded in her lap, every muscle in her back tight as wire. When Jenna took the stage, she walked straight to the bench, bowed once, then placed her hands over the keys. She didn't hesitate. The piece was something classical, but subdued. Measured, emotional, full of restraint. Halfway through, Mildred recognized the phrasing. It was John's arrangement, the one he used to play on Sunday mornings, soft enough to let her sleep. The last notes rang out and Jenna turned to the audience, voice shaking slightly. I'd like to dedicate this to my grandfather, for always hearing me. Mildred's eyes burned. She stood before the applause could settle, stepped quietly to the aisle, and slipped out into the hallway. The air was cooler there, sterile and unscented. She leaned against the brick wall and let one tear fall. Just one. She didn't go back in. She waited on the bench by the door until the recital ended. Jenna came out smiling, cheeks flushed. I saw you leave. Mildred nodded. It was beautiful. I needed air. Jenna understood. She didn't ask more. That night, the house was quiet except for the soft buzz of the refrigerator and the wind outside slipping through the mailbox flap. Mildred sat at the writing desk, the same one she'd used to pen thank you cards for wedding gifts 53 years earlier. She opened a fresh notebook. No title, no greeting, just the page. And she began. I have spent too much time writing to people who never read me. This one is for me. You've survived the humiliation of being ignored, the ache of being blamed, and the sharp, unspoken cruelty of being replaced. But you are still here. You're not righteous, and you're not bitter. You're just done explaining your softness to people who mistake it for weakness. She paused. The pen trembled in her hand. Then she continued. They were your family. But they weren't your kin. There's a difference. You don't owe the people who hurt you another stage. You owe yourself a life without their noise in it. A knock came at the door. One soft, one pause. Another. Not Jenna, not Elaine. She capped the pen and closed the notebook, then stood to answer it. The Ashbury Arts Endowment Board met in the repurposed city library, a red brick building that still smelled faintly of dust and erasers. Rows of folding chairs had been arranged in a wide semicircle beneath the high arch of what had once been the reading room. Afternoon light filtered through leaded glass windows, casting soft ripples of color across the polished floor. Mildred entered quietly, clutching her black wool coat tight at the collar. She hadn't worn makeup, just a dab of face cream and her usual perfume, something faint, floral, older than the newest board members. Still, when she stepped inside, several heads turned, not out of surprise, out of respect. Nathan was already seated near the front. He gave her a small nod, nothing performative. Elaine arrived minutes later and sat beside her, sliding over a printed agenda without a word. At the top, Whittaker Endowment. Opening session. Mildred scanned the list of items. Item 3 caught her eye. Dedication of nameplate, John and Mildred Whittaker Studio Grant Fund. Her breath hitched. The meeting moved swiftly. Budget allocations, committee formations, volunteer recruitment. Then item 3. The chairwoman stood and gestured toward a velvet curtain hanging near the entrance. A local student, no older than Jenna, stepped forward and drew the curtain aside with 2 hands. Behind it, mounted on the wall, was a bronze plaque. New, polished, gleaming, Whittaker Studio Fund. In loving memory of John R. Whittaker, and with enduring gratitude to Mildred G. Whittaker, patrons of truth, art, and second chances. Mildred blinked, hard. For a second, she tried to compose herself, straighten her back, still her jaw, hold the tears behind some imagined dam of grace. But they came anyway, not rushed, not dramatic, just honest. One slow tear, then another. This time, no one stopped her. No one leaned in to whisper, "It's embarrassing." No one laughed behind a screen or rolled their eyes from the next pew. This was her moment, and it belonged to no one else. Jenna appeared beside her without warning, slipping into the seat just as the clapping began. She didn't say anything at first, just wrapped both arms around Mildred's shoulder, tucking her head in close. "You still matter," she whispered. "To the right people." Mildred's hand reached over and held hers. That's all she needed to hear. The event moved into light refreshments, cheese cubes, white wine, polite chat. Elaine chatted with the treasurer about upcoming recitals. Nathan reviewed paperwork with a man from the university. Mildred excused herself early. Outside, the air was sharp with oncoming winter. She pulled her coat tight again, walking toward the parking lot with steady steps and a full heart. Her breath clouded in front of her, but she didn't rush. She let the cold meet her. The car was quiet when she climbed in. Jenna had gone back inside to help the volunteers pack up. The engine clicked softly as it warmed, the radio off. Her phone buzzed in her coat pocket. One new text, Vanessa. She hesitated before unlocking it. "You've made a mess of our reputation. I hope the plaque was worth it." The words sat there, small, petty, acidic in their precision. Mildred didn't reply. She didn't argue. She didn't forward the message to Elaine or save it for proof. She blocked the number. Then, just to be certain, she deleted every thread before it. Not out of anger, out of sanitation. She deserved a clean inbox. She placed the phone back in her coat pocket, turned the key in the ignition, and waited for the heater to hum back to life. As she drove away, she passed the rec center, the one where her piano now sat in the corner of the music room, covered lovingly with a donated cloth. 2 kids stood by the glass, one of them pressing keys with wide-eyed delight while the other watched. She smiled. Not because they knew her name, but because they didn't have to. That night, back home, She set her keys in the bowl by the door and found a package waiting for her on the table. No return address. But the handwriting was unmistakable. Derek's. She picked it up slowly. It was light. Too light. She carried it to the kitchen, knife in hand, and then paused. Unopened. Again. The package sat on the kitchen table for 3 days. Each morning, Mildred passed it. Each evening, she turned the lights off with it still sitting there, unmoved, unopened, unworthy of her time. The handwriting had begun to fade slightly from the sun filtering through the breakfast nook, curling the corner of the envelope just enough to make it look desperate. She never touched it again, and she never spoke of it. Instead, she left Derek's latest public post, the one accusing her of orchestrating estrangement and dismantling the idea of family, completely alone. No response, no counter-explanation, no private calls to explain her side. He was used to her bending toward guilt. This time, she didn't even lean. On Friday morning, Jenna stopped by after school drop-off, cheeks pink from the wind and hands holding something flat and wrapped in brown paper. "I drew something," she said, placing it on the counter. "No big deal, but I kept thinking about what Grandpa used to say, that some roots grow deeper after a storm." Mildred peeled back the paper carefully. A sketch. Charcoal on textured cream stock. A tree, gnarled, strong, impossibly detailed. The trunk was thick, with roots sprawling deep beneath cracked ground. A few branches were jagged and broken. Some bent, barely hanging on, but the center stood tall, unbent, unyielding. In one corner, tiny initials, JLW. Mildred blinked quickly. "It's not perfect," Jenna added, suddenly shy. "But I thought you might want it." Elaine came by that afternoon, took one look at the sketch, and said, "Well, damn, you're framing that." She disappeared into the garage, came back 30 minutes later with a brass-edged frame and a hammer, and hung the piece right beside Mildred's front door, where guests, mail carriers, and ghosts from the past would all see it on their way in. "It says enough," Elaine muttered, tapping the glass lightly, "even when you don't." That night, after dinner and 2 full days of quiet, Mildred returned to her desk and opened a document she hadn't touched since the week of John's funeral, her obituary. The one she had started and never finished. She scrolled through it, dry details, dates, schooling, a short note about her music career, a polite life summarized like a bulletin board announcement. She deleted most of it and rewrote the closing line. She cried at funerals and dared to matter afterward. She paused, reread it, then saved. On Sunday, she walked 3 blocks to the Ashbury Gazette office with an envelope in hand. The receptionist, barely 20, took the letter with a kind smile and said, "We post features like this online too, if that's all right." Mildred nodded. "Let it live where people look." The letter ran under Community Voices 3 days later. It wasn't long. It didn't name names. It talked about grief, the kind that doesn't always wear black or arrive with casseroles. It talked about boundaries, the ones you build not to keep people out, but to keep your soul from leaking away a teaspoon at a time. And it talked about legacy, not in money or plaques, but in piano keys played gently, and trees sketched with roots no one else thought to see. By that evening, the paper's website had 89 comments. Not a single one was cruel. More honest than most preachers I've heard. "I cried on the bus reading this. We see you, Mrs. Whitaker. Thank you." Jenna forwarded screenshots to Mildred with heart emojis. Elaine dropped off a bottle of Merlot and said, "I'm buying 2 copies for my sister, one to read, one to roll up and hit herself with." Nathan sent a single text. "Respect looks good on you, always has." Mildred didn't cry, not this time. She just sat quietly on the couch that night, reading every word from the townspeople who, for once, chose to listen. Then she opened a fresh page in her notebook. She began, "There's a difference between being quiet and being silenced. This time, I got to choose the silence." She set the pen down. In the hallway, the framed sketch caught the light. The roots glowed like they'd always been there, buried deep but never broken. Across town, another letter was being stamped. Another envelope sealed. But this one didn't come from Derek, and it wasn't addressed to Mildred. It was addressed to Jenna, from someone she didn't expect. Jenna stood in the doorway, cheeks flushed from the cold, envelope still in hand. Mildred said nothing at first. She simply stepped aside, leaving the door open long enough for the wind to sneak in before she shut it behind them both. They walked into the kitchen together. Jenna set the envelope down, unopened. It sat between them like a relic. They said I had to pick a side, she said softly. Mildred reached for the kettle. So you picked peace. Jenna blinked fast but said nothing. Her coat was still on. Her fingers tapped the counter like she was trying to remember what comfort used to feel like. Mildred slid a mug toward her. Tea or cocoa? Cocoa, with cinnamon, if you still have it. I always have it. Jenna smiled. Faint, but real. They moved quietly, the choreography of familiarity guiding their motions. Mildred stirred. Jenna fetched mugs. The radio was silent until Mildred tilted her head and said, "You pick the music tonight." Jenna hesitated. "You sure?" "Absolutely." She pulled out her phone, queued up a playlist. Acoustic guitar filled the kitchen, gentle, modern, and nothing like the classical tapes Mildred once clung to. But it didn't clash. It just coexisted. Together they cooked. No recipes, just instincts. Jenna cracked the eggs. Mildred measured flour. They debated salt-to-sugar ratios like war generals with pastry sheets. And somewhere between the chopping and the laughing, something in the room shifted. Not fixed, but softened. Elaine showed up with an overnight bag and her usual entrance line. "I come bearing clean sheets and the tea that doesn't taste like tree bark." Mildred raised an eyebrow. "You planning to move in?" Elaine kicked off her boots. "Not unless you've got a spare closet. But you do need help setting up that guest room. And Jenna's car is parked out front like she's not leaving soon." Jenna flushed, but didn't argue. Elaine marched up the stairs, calling over her shoulder. "Where's that extra duvet? I swear I'm not using the one that smells like mothballs." They laughed. It echoed all the way down the hall. Later, the kitchen table was a battlefield of envelopes, pens, and scholarship lists. Mildred sat at the head of the table, reading glasses on, pen gliding across cardstock in neat, slanted cursive. "Dear Olivia, may your hands never doubt their worth." "Dear Marcus, may your voice echo beyond the page." Jenna followed suit, her handwriting tighter, more modern. "Dear Talia, art needs your defiance." Elaine sipped wine and addressed envelopes with the efficiency of someone who once mailed invitations for 3 weddings and a court date in the same year. They worked in comfortable silence, the kind that doesn't ask to be filled. Then Mildred paused. Her pen hovered above the final card. No name, just blank space. Jenna looked over. "Miss 1?" Mildred shook her head. "This one isn't for a student," she wrote slowly, carefully, "for the girl I once was, who played too quietly so others could speak louder, who apologized when she should have walked out, who thought being good meant staying invisible. You mattered. You always did. I just forgot to tell you, she didn't sign it. She didn't need to." Jenna said nothing, just reached over and slid the card into an envelope, sealed it, and placed it atop the stack. Elaine looked up. "Where's that one headed?" "Nowhere," Mildred replied. "It already arrived." That night, Mildred tucked fresh linens into the guest bed, fluffed the pillow just once, and left a soft lamp on low. Downstairs, Jenna curled up on the couch, sketch pad in her lap, doodling absent-minded trees and hands and open doors. Elaine poured the last of the wine. "You realize this house feels different now, right?" Mildred looked around. "So do I." The wind outside picked up. It no longer sounded like something trying to get in. It sounded like something being let go. In the dark, in her own room, Mildred sat at the window with the lamp off. She looked out at the street, the trees, the silhouette of her mailbox barely visible through the porch light's glow. The house was still. For once, so was she. She reached into the drawer and pulled out the unopened letter Jenna had brought. She turned it over in her hand. No return address. Only her granddaughter's name in a stranger's script. She didn't open it, not yet, but she carried it upstairs and left it gently on the desk in the guest room. The envelope was still unopened on the desk when Nathan arrived the next morning. No greetings, no pleasantries, just a nod and the quiet sound of a briefcase locking into place on the dining room table. "Filed it already," he said. pulling out the document binder. The moment the affidavit hit my inbox, Mildred poured him a cup of coffee, black. No sugar. He took it without looking up. Jenna leaned against the doorframe, arms folded. So, that's it? Nathan adjusted his glasses. The medical records were solid. Psychological clearance dated 3 weeks ago. Notarized. Witnessed. It's airtight. Elaine walked in behind Jenna, tying her robe tighter. You're telling me they thought that was gonna stick? They underestimated her. Nathan flipped the last page and held it up. The judge dismissed it this morning. No appeal. Mildred didn't react right away. She just picked up the folded newspaper at the edge of the table, thumbed past the headlines, and smiled when she saw the tiny notice in the legal section. Claim on estate assets. Denied. Due to lack of standing. Alan embarrassed me in public, she said quietly. Now he's embarrassed himself in court. Nathan smirked. His lawyer didn't even show up for the dismissal hearing. Sent an email. Said his client withdrew interest. Elaine raised her mug of sweet tea. Justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it just makes a man look stupid in front of a judge. They all chuckled, but only briefly, because it wasn't really funny. It was just done. And done, in this house, felt like a victory. Later that afternoon, the November sun leaked through the kitchen window, casting slanted shadows across the hardwood floor. Jenna crouched beside the old cedar chest Mildred had once labeled, for later, in bold black marker. She ran her hand over the lid before lifting it. Inside were layers, some yellowed with time, some newer. She pulled out an old Polaroid first. Mildred in jeans and a white t-shirt, standing in front of a just-sold house with a welcome home balloon tied to the mailbox. Jenna recognized the front porch. Below it, a sealed letter in an envelope marked, "Read when you're ready." No name. Just the handwriting Jenna now knew as her grandmother's. Then came the deed. Heavy stock paper, perfectly preserved. Her name on it. Jenna froze. Behind her, Mildred's voice was soft but steady. "It's yours now." Jenna turned, eyes wide. "What?" "The house. I transferred it before the hearing. I knew they'd try something stupid, so I got smarter." "But why not wait? You didn't know how it'd all shake out. I didn't need to." Mildred stepped closer, crouched beside her. "This house saw me become someone I didn't always like. But you make it warmer just by being in it." Jenna stared at the deed like it might dissolve. Mildred placed a hand over hers. "Just promise me something. Anything. Fill it with warmth, laughter, bad cocoa, and worse music. Let it matter, the way it should have all along." Jenna nodded, too choked up to speak. She reached down and touched the corner of the letter, but didn't lift it yet. "Not ready. Maybe tomorrow." From the living room, Elaine called out, "I found the Christmas boxes." And Mildred, "Why do you own 3 identical nativity scenes and 0 extension cords?" They laughed, shaky but real. Jenna stood slowly, brushing dust from her jeans. She looked around the room again, as if seeing it for the first time. It felt different. It felt hers. As she stepped toward the doorway, she caught something else, tucked deep in the cedar chest, behind the last layer of linens. A folder, newer than the rest. Labeled only, unsent. She stared at it, then turned and called out, "Mildred?" No answer. Just the soft sound of footsteps going up the stairs. Jenna looked back down at the folder, still untouched, then picked it up and opened it. It started with a blurry photo in the Milltown Gazette. Grainy, low resolution, zoomed in too far. But the subject was unmistakable. Derek. Shoulders hunched, dragging a cardboard box to the back of a dented pickup truck outside a pale blue rental on Ryer Street. No caption. Just a 2-sentence blurb under the real estate shuffle column. Tenant vacated early. Property back on market. Unclear where he's headed. Mildred didn't see it. She folded the paper that morning and slid it, untouched, into the recycling bin. She knew what her eyes didn't need. But Elaine, ever the collector of people's missteps, kept her own copy folded in her purse. "He's moving," she told Mildred that afternoon while drying silverware. No furniture left except a futon and a cracked Keurig. "Guess he ran out of airs and hot air." Mildred didn't look up from the pan she was scrubbing. "He's quiet now," Elaine smirked. "Should have tried that at the memorial." Silence fell again, the kind that wasn't heavy, just full. Mildred rinsed the pan, dried it, and hung it on the hook above the stove, like always. Then she reached into the drawer and pulled out the battered hardware store catalog she'd marked months ago but never ordered from. "I think I want a new lamp," she said finally. Elaine raised an eyebrow. "Starting a revolution?" Mildred didn't answer, just circled one in blue pen, a small amber glass desk lamp with a scalloped shade, and set the page aside. That night, in the guest room turned bedroom turned maybe her space, Jenna sat cross-legged on the bed, laptop warming her legs, a Word doc blinking. College application essay in Hatin or not. Draft 1. She stared at the prompt for hours. Describe a challenge you've overcome and what it taught you about yourself. Then slowly, her fingers moved. When people say resilience, they picture something strong. A wall. A bridge? Something unbreakable. I don't think that's quite right. Resilience is a woman named Mildred who once held her grief like a second spine. Who opened a door, not because it was easy, but because it mattered. She taught me that healing is not loud, it's not heroic. Sometimes it's a quiet room where the cocoa is burnt, and the silence is real, and no one tries to fix it. She showed me how to stay soft when the world wants you sharp. She reminded me I was never too late to come home. Jenna stared at the screen, reread it twice, then hit save. She didn't show it to anyone, not yet. The next morning, the new lamp arrived. Mildred unpacked it carefully on the front porch, ignoring Elaine's amused glances from the window. She plugged it in by the reading chair in the corner of the living room, where the light had always been dim. Like it was waiting for an excuse not to try. The amber glow reached farther than she expected. That afternoon, with a scarf tied around her neck, and the air brisk with the scent of dead leaves and turned soil, Mildred stepped out into the backyard. The garden had thinned with the season. Stalks browned, blossoms gone, but the bones of it remained, the archway she built, the stone bench Jenna painted last spring, the faded wind chimes tinkling like the past hadn't left yet. She walked slowly along the edge of the path, trailing her fingers over the dried lavender stems. Then she began to hum. Not a song anyone else would know, just something old. The lullaby her mother used to sing when the nights were too long and the heater too slow. She hadn't hummed it in years, but it came back like breath. And as she turned the corner of the garden, hand brushing the edge of the trellis, she paused. A small, fresh envelope sat nestled in the crook of the bench, new paper, her name in Jenna's handwriting. Just 2 words written on the front. "Read me." The hall smelled faintly of polished oak and lemon cleaner, the kind of scent meant to suggest importance. A modest crowd filled the small auditorium. Trustees from the Milltown Arts Foundation, a few local reporters, 6 students, and 3 people who had learned the art of surviving each other. Mildred adjusted the silk scarf at her neck, not for vanity, but steadiness. Her palms didn't tremble anymore. Elaine stood at her side, clutching a paper program printed with the words, "The Carr Legacy Grant," honoring art, endurance, and integrity. Jenna, just behind them, wore a simple black dress, and her nervousness like perfume. A woman from the foundation took the podium. Her voice was polite and practiced as she spoke of vision, community investment, and lasting legacy. But when she gestured toward Mildred, something in the room quieted, as if even the air understood the gravity of the moment. Mildred approached the microphone. The engraved plaque stood beneath a crimson cloth, waiting. She didn't look at it yet. She looked at the audience, at the uncertain faces, the folded programs, the weight of all that had been whispered about her family these last months. Her voice, when it came, was steady. "Grief deserves space," she said. "So does dignity. No theatrics, no tremor, just truth. I spent years pretending those 2 things couldn't live in the same house, that if you let grief stay, you'd lose your dignity. I was wrong. Dignity doesn't mean silence. It means choosing who gets to hear your story and who doesn't." She paused, eyes gliding briefly toward Jenna, who was blinking hard, holding herself very still. Mildred continued softer now. "This grant isn't about the past. It's about what we plant after loss. It's about the voices we let grow when the shouting stops." The audience didn't breathe. She stepped aside, and the foundation chair pulled the cloth free. The brass plaque gleamed in the stage lights. The Carr Legacy Grant. For artists who turn endurance into creation. Applause began politely but soon softened. Like the room understood that clapping felt wrong here. It wasn't celebration, it was reverence. Then Jenna stood. Her sketchbook was nowhere in sight. Instead, she carried her guitar. The strings trembled at first, then steadied into a melody Mildred recognized. Slow, spare, haunting. Something built from the lullaby that once lived in Mildred's throat. When the final note faded, no one moved. Elaine was the first to reach out, sliding her hand over Mildred's. "You wrote the ending," she whispered. "Not them." Mildred exhaled, a long, clean breath that felt like the first she'd taken in years. For once there was no bitterness hiding behind it. Just air. Just peace. The house was still when she returned that evening. The lamp glowed in its corner, warm and low. The garden lights twinkled faintly through the window. On the kitchen table sat a single program from the ceremony, folded neatly beside a half-finished cup of tea. She moved through the rooms like she was reacquainting herself with them. The floor creaked the same, the stairs sighed the same. But the weight that had once haunted the corners was gone. She was alone, yes, but not lonely. She stood in front of the mirror by the stairs, the one that had reflected every argument, every slammed door, every apology too late to matter. Her reflection looked older, but lighter. She smiled. And then, as if speaking to no one and everyone at once, she said quietly, "At my husband's memorial, my son whispered, 'Don't cry, it's embarrassing.'" A pause, then the faintest curve of her mouth as she added, "He learned embarrassment when the lawyer read the will aloud." The lamp's light caught her face, gold and steady. And for the first time in years, she didn't look like someone surviving. She looked like someone free.